In the dark, cold corners of medieval Europe, a terrifying device was born. Not to kill, but to destroy. It was small, metallic, and simple. But it had one purpose. To tear away a woman's flesh, her identity, her womanhood. They called it the breast ripper. During the Middle Ages, especially in 16th and 17th century Germany, punishment was more than just justice. It was spectacle, fear, and power. Societies were built on strict control. Of religion, of speech, and especially, of women. Any woman who stepped outside the norms, accused of adultery, witchcraft, heresy, or even simply being too outspoken, could be dragged into the streets and handed over to the torturers. And once inside the dungeons of pain, the breast ripper awaited. It was a claw-like iron instrument, sometimes with 4 or more curved blades. Often heated red-hot before use. The torturer would grip the device and clamp it on a woman's breast, then tear flesh, skin, blood, muscle, ripped from the body in one horrible pull. But why? Why would an entire society allow something so brutal to exist? Because in medieval Germany, fear was law, and shame was control. And when they wanted to make an example of a woman, they didn't just kill her. They unmade her. This was not merely punishment. It was a message. And today, we'll go deep into the shadows of history to uncover the horrifying truth behind this savage torture. From the hidden chambers where women screamed in silence, to the iron claws still preserved in museums, this is the full story of the breast ripper, the most feared punishment for women in medieval German. In the narrow alleyways of medieval German cities, lined with stone houses, crooked wooden signs, and the constant smell of smoke and filth, rumors could kill. A whispered accusation was often enough. A woman didn't need to be guilty, only different. Maybe she was beautiful, unmarried, educated, or simply disliked by her neighbors. That's all it took. She talks too much. She bleeds unnaturally. She is barren. She was seen alone at night. That was enough. That was evidence. Soon, 2 armed men from the town's tribunal would appear at her door. She'd be dragged to the town prison. No lawyer. No advocate. No warning. Inside the prison, the accused woman, often in her 20s or 30s, but sometimes barely a teenager, would be chained in a damp cell beneath the courthouse or church. The walls were made of stone. The air smelled of urine, rot, and old blood. She would be left for hours, sometimes days, alone, hungry, scared. Then came the interrogation. 3 men usually presided. A clergyman, to ensure the process was spiritually justified. A civil magistrate, to record the legal procedures. And a torturer, hooded or masked, to carry out the punishment. The woman would be accused formally: adultery, heresy, infanticide, witchcraft, seduction, or even unholy influence over men. Many denied it. Many cried. But the truth didn't matter. The torture chamber was already prepared. She was led, barefoot, usually naked from the waist up, into the chamber. The townspeople sometimes watched from grates above, especially if the punishment was public. Her arms were bound behind her back. She was made to kneel, then forced down on her back. That's when the breast ripper was brought out. The iron claws glinted in the candlelight. 4 prongs curved outward like talons. The torturer would hold it high for the crowd to see. Then he placed the instrument into hot coals until it turned red. The woman screamed. She sobbed. She begged. But that didn't stop them. They lifted the red-hot claw. 1 claw for each breast. Then, screaming steel met flesh. The breast ripper would be clamped over the soft tissue of the breast and ripped away in a sharp, savage motion. Tearing skin, muscle, and often even bone from the ribcage. Blood poured instantly. Nerves shrieked with pain. The body thrashed against the chains. The smell of burning flesh filled the chamber. Sometimes, the device wasn't hot, just sharp. That made the pain different. Cold, tearing, savage. In some cases, the torture didn't remove the entire breast. Instead, they would repeat the motion, again and again, until only pulp and blood remained. In others, 1 breast was mutilated as punishment, and the second left intact as a reminder. In a few rare cases, if the woman passed out, they'd revive her with vinegar or salt on the open wounds, just to continue the pain. The screams were said to echo down the alleys for hours. The torture didn't always end with the breast ripper. If the woman still refused to confess, she could be subjected to more. The iron chair, heated from below while she sat bleeding. Thumbscrews, to break fingers bone by bone. Or the Spanish boot, to crush her shins. But the breast ripper remained one of the most feared instruments, because of what it represented. It wasn't just about pain. It was about public destruction of womanhood. Sometimes, the final act of the torture would involve branding the woman with a cross or devil's mark on her chest, even over her ruined skin, before she was tossed into a wagon, alive or dead, and discarded at the city's edge. Few survived, and those who did lived in isolation, bearing visible proof of what the state could do. They were no longer considered women, no longer allowed to marry, to raise children, or to walk freely. Some committed suicide, others went mad, and others, the rarest of all, whispered their stories into the ears of daughters and neighbors, and thus the tale of the breast ripper was passed on through generations, as a warning. When the screams faded from the stone chambers and the blood dried on the iron claws of the breast ripper, silence followed. But that silence was not peace, it was terror. In the small towns of medieval Germany, no one spoke aloud of the woman who had been dragged to the town square, stripped, tortured, and left to die. Her name was erased, her house seized, her family dishonored, neighbors looked away, children were told, she was a witch, or, she deserved it. But deep down, they knew, any woman could be next. The psychological aftermath of such torture was massive. Women learned to be quiet, to be obedient, to not speak out. The fear of public mutilation, a horror uniquely gendered, became a silent form of control. Entire generations of women grew up with these tales whispered like curses around the fireplace. Some women who survived the torture became mad, wandering the streets, their chests scarred and raw, their minds broken. Others were sent to live in leper colonies or convents, where they would spend the rest of their lives praying or hiding from society. Yet the tools of their destruction, the breast rippers themselves, were not destroyed. Instead, they were preserved. In museums across Europe today, behind glass, rusted iron breast rippers still exist. They sit silently among racks of medieval torture tools. The pear of anguish, the heretic's fork, the Iron Maiden. Sometimes labeled simply, instrument of interrogation, the true horror of their use is downplayed. But the metal remembers. In Nuremberg, Prague, and Krems, these devices have been photographed, studied, even replicated. They are part of dark tourism, drawing thousands of visitors each year. People walk past them, snap pictures, and leave. But most will never know the full screams behind the steel. The blood soaked into the handles. The lives lost. The pain specifically engineered for the female body. In some feminist writings of the modern day, the breast ripper has reappeared, not as a torture tool, but as a symbol of the historical violence against women. Documentaries, exhibitions, and horror art pieces have incorporated the device as metaphor. It's even appeared in modern horror films, evoking visceral reactions from viewers. Why? Because the idea of tearing away the very symbol of womanhood, with steel and fire, remains one of the most perverse and effective tools of terror ever created. Some horror historians consider the breast ripper a perfect torture device, not because it killed, but because it destroyed identity, femininity, motherhood, and beauty in one motion. It wasn't just the pain, it was the shame, the silence, and the surgical removal of humanity. And even now, echoes of such cruelty remain. Today, in some corners of the world, gender-based torture still exists. Rape is warfare, acid attacks, genital mutilation, and though the devices may look different, the intent is the same: to break the body, to dominate the mind, and to control through fear. As you close this story, watching the last image fade to black, remember, the breast ripper may be history, but the mindset that created it still breathes. You've just witnessed one of the darkest punishments in history, but many more still lurk in the shadows. So if you dare, subscribe to Torture Vault, where every scream from the past still echoes.